What if I told you OVO was actually a gang? You thought it was Drake's label, but really, it's just a front for the modern day iteration of one of Toronto's most dangerous street gangs. The only difference is, Drake is possibly the most successful musician living on Earth right now, and him being the billionaire leader of one of Toronto's most dangerous gangs is like if Michael Jackson became the leader of the Rollin' 60s Crips. Over on Reddit forums for Toronto gangs, where they post pictures of famous gangsters and their affiliations, they also show Drake with some of the most notorious gangsters turned rappers in all of Toronto. Presser, affiliated with the Crews 3L and BFR, while the image also includes members of a gang known as G-Way. Two notorious members known as Gilla and Preem are right there with Drake. And this post listing everyone's gang affiliations also lists Drake as a member of the G-Way gang too. But posts like these are just the tip of the Iceman iceberg. And before you say I'm capping, Drake has pretty much laid out all of his gang affiliations openly to the public in numerous songs. In track after track, he pretty much admits to being a real-life mob boss. And this includes his newest album, Iceman, where he's included songs like Plot Twist, which are basically entirely made up of Drake boasting about his position as the leader of this gang. He even starts that song out hinting at exactly what this video is about, assuring the listener that OVO is just a label, going on to reflect on how by the grace of God, instead of being in the streets and ending up in front of racist judges, he can now make billions from music and performing. And he then goes on to reveal to everyone that this is all actually just a cover, going on to claim himself that OVO is actually a gang, even ending the song with a skit from Ben Don, who says that the OVO necklace he got from Drake is a symbol of their membership to the same gang. Drake also brags on that song Plot Twist about how he's trying to stay laid back because he knows he's got hot-headed crash outs all around him who want to get revenge after the humiliation caused by Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us. Drake raps Free T in reference to Tory Lanez, the Canadian rapper jailed for shooting Megan Thee Stallion, but then he goes on to say Free Greasy. This is a reference to an infamous former leader of the G-Way gang, and later in the song, Drake even raps that if you don't know the G-Way gang handshake, then he simply can't trust you. The boasting about his gang ties culminates in the hook of the song, which seems to be a smart way of Drake confirming to the whole world that OVO is indeed a gang. Drake raps about how someone is looking at him, twisting up their fingers, throwing up gang signs, essentially gangbanging on Drake, and I think this is basically a metaphorical reference to the beef with Kendrick Lamar and his ties to the blood gangs of Compton. Throwing up gang signs or twisting your fingers up is how gangs show their allegiances all over the world, from LA to Toronto. In fact, I've witnessed the gangbanging habits of Kendrick's actual set in Compton with my own eyes during a controversial hood vlog that I did in Kendrick's hood that ended up getting taken down after I got pressed by his top lieutenant, Hitter J3. Drake would clap back at these bloods making hand signs at him, saying that the gang symbols they're twisting up he's never seen before, he doesn't know what they mean or respect them, before rapping that he's throwing gang signs back at them since they're gangbanging on him, explaining which signs he's throwing up, starting with the 6 representing the entire Toronto, before rapping how he's twisting the R, this being a tribute to another G-Way affiliated Toronto gang set known as Reps Up, a street clique that was allegedly formed by OVO's veteran members, who Drake also shouts out in the song, these two being Styles and another person called P, aka Preem or P Rain. In fact, if you look at the way Drake throws up his 6 for Toronto with a kind of split finger at the top with like a bunny ear effect, well that's intentional, because it actually is the gang sign creating the letter R that stands for the Reps Up gang. So throwing up the 6 in this way upside down is basically throwing up the gang sign for Reps Up. You might recognize this gang sign from the picture on the very cover of the Iceman album, which if you flip vertically shows Drake throwing up the Reps Up gang sign perfectly, made even more iconic by the fact that he was doing it in Michael Jackson's actual original sequin glove that Drake apparently bought for $120,000. Elsewhere on Plot Twist, Drake would shout out other gang ties he's got from different cities, like his connects from Houston known as Mob Ties. This being the new generation of Rap-A-Lot, the infamous label and crew started by one of the most infamous men in Houston rap history, J. Prince Sr. This organization has since transformed into something resembling much more of a gang than a record label under the fearsome moniker Mob Ties, apparently founded and led by J. Prince Jr. Drake would then end the hook of the song by saying that he's twisting up the October gang, essentially confirming that OVO is actually a gang that brings power from all of these crews together in one organization. But while Drake's OVO has had a lot of connections in Houston and elsewhere in America, it's really in Canada and Toronto where Drake's real killers are lurking. And it seems like the person he's actually threatening on Iceman with these killers is indeed Kendrick Lamar and his blood gang. As Drake ends his final verse, rapping how he doesn't recognize any of the gang signs that Kendrick or his people like Hitter J3 are throwing up, saying that maybe where they're from people know what it means, but all he knows is that his gang of OVO savages are furious towards Kendrick and the Bloods. So at this point, the question really is, how on earth did Drake end up surrounded by so many dangerous people tied to these vicious gangs like G-Way and Reps Up in the first place, and why is he snitching on them and himself on a #1 album? Well, to answer that, in this video, I'm going to rewind the clock and take a look back at the violent and dark history of the streets of Toronto, the true story behind the gangs that Drake claims, and the very sad reality of life in the streets for the gangsters that bang G-Way. Content warning. This video is about a sensitive topic involving loss of life. We've removed any graphic content to comply with YouTube's guidelines. We aim to provide informative, factual journalism on a tragic event in the public interest that does not dismiss its seriousness. All clips are used under the doctrine of fair use for news reporting and analysis. Some points made in this video are opinions and theories. I am not responsible for third-party information. If you want to watch my videos uncut and extended, go to patreon.com/traplawross, where you can get those for just $2. Also, you can now watch my new drops on Spotify, so go search me there. Here's the video. On the evening of July 16, 2012, more than 200 people had gathered at a block party that started earlier in the day as a children's barbecue. The summer was at its peak and everyone was enjoying themselves until suddenly gunshots rang out in the evening air. Within seconds, the celebration turned into chaos as terrified partygoers scattered in every direction, desperately trying to escape the hail of bullets. By the time the gunfire stopped, 2 innocent people were dead and more than 20 others had been wounded, as Toronto was left reeling from one of the worst mass shootings in the city's history. The massacre would dominate headlines across the country, with politicians, police, and the public all demanding answers. How had a neighborhood block party turned into a bloodbath? Well, to understand that, we need to go way back, because while the Danzig Street shooting shocked much of Canada, for those familiar with the history of gangs in Toronto's East End, it was only the latest chapter in a conflict that had been brewing for years. This being a conflict involving one of Toronto's most notorious street gangs, Drake's gang, the G-Way, or what the media would begin to call the Galloway Boys. Long before this gang's name would be claimed and shouted out on #1 albums by the world's biggest rap star Drake, the early history of the G-Way would be closely tied to a high-rise and the surrounding townhouses located at the intersection of Galloway Road and Kingston Road in the East End area of Toronto called Scarborough. During the 90s, immigration from Jamaica to Canada increased considerably, bringing with it some unwanted criminal influences such as the infamous Shower Posse, who had built a fearsome reputation both in Jamaica and the United States. One area where these new criminal influences had strong presence was around the Galloway Road, where at the time a boy named Tyshawn Riley was growing up. Known to his friends as Nitty, he looked up to the gangsters in his neighborhood and eventually started a gang of his own with a group of friends called the Bad Seeds, while also picking up another nickname, one that would ultimately stick, Greasy Money, this becoming the street name he would be known as on the blocks of Scarborough. The Galloway area of the time was largely controlled by a gang that Riley looked up to, known as the Get Mad Crew, led particularly by one prominent figure, Omar Demetrius, better known in the streets as O. So the 90s would go by around Galloway Road without too many major conflicts, as many of the gangsters there were more focused on hustling and making money by selling drugs like crack and weed than shooting up their rivals like they do in places like Chirac. But coming into the 2000s, a major beef began forming between dealers from Galloway, aka G-Way, and drug dealers from the nearby neighborhood of Malvern, who were attempting to expand their operation to the G-Way area. At this time, the original leader of Galloway, Omar Demetrius, had already fled from Canada after he ended up shooting a man in the leg and arm in 1999, fleeing Canada back to his home country of Jamaica before the police could catch him. So with Demetrius on the run, leadership of the gang fell to his close friend Norris Allen, known in the streets as Bolu, who stepped in to take charge of the G-Way. Unfortunately, Allen wouldn't last long as the gang's leader. On October the 10th, 2002, he parked his black Honda on the front lawn of his family's rented house deep inside the rival territory in Malvern. Sometime later, after saying goodbye to his mother and sister, the 21-year-old climbed back into his car and prepared to leave, but before he could pull away, 3 gunmen suddenly emerged and opened fire, leaving Allen slumped over in the driver's seat as the Honda remained idling in the driveway. The police would immediately declare this killing as gang-related, and according to one of the confidential informants, Allen's killers were 2 members of a gang from Malvern, which had left members of the G-Way furious. This included Riley, who was now just weeks away from his 20th birthday, and determined to retaliate, he took charge of the gang and renamed it the Throwbacks in honor of Allen, the name reflecting their mission to make members of the Malvern crew suffer the same fate as their former leader, with the Throwbacks becoming something like Toronto's equivalent of Chicago's infamous Get Back gang, which emerged within the notorious O-Block gang following the murder of one of their most respected members, T. Roy. So back in the G-Way, it wouldn't take long for the Get-Backs to begin, as only weeks later on the 2nd of November, 23-year-old Eric Matissa was found gunned down in Malvern. And while the police struggled to find leads, the assumption was that the murder was related to the feud between gangs from Galway and Malvern. The rivalry continued for 2 years until March 2004, when it reached a breaking point, and at the center of it all was none other than Tyshawn Riley, aka Greasy Money, who allegedly set out to target members of the Malvern gang together with his alleged accomplices. But unfortunately, during this attempted get-back, they would open fire on a car that was carrying 2 innocent men, Brenton Charlton and Leonard Bell, who were just unlucky enough to be driving through the Malvern gang territory, with Riley allegedly killing Charlton and seriously wounding Bell. This incident was part of a larger increase in shootings in Scarborough that made Toronto police raise the stakes, calling in the Canadian Feds, aka the RCMP, or the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to assist the investigation. And only a few months later in May, the case would lead to results, as Toronto police would conduct a massive raid, arresting 65 alleged members and affiliates of a gang the media were calling the Malvern Crew. This was followed in October with the arrest and charging of Riley, aka Greasy Money, for the murder and attempted murder of the 2 innocent victims, followed by arrests of over a dozen other G-Way members, or what the media would begin to call the Galloway Boys. The raids were part of what police called Operation Pathfinder, named after the Nissan Pathfinder that Riley and his accomplices had allegedly used during the shooting of the 2 innocent victims. The Toronto police would even claim that G-Way had planned to target innocent victims on purpose in order to throw off the law enforcement, but while there's no proof if this alleged plan was ever put into motion, the end result would unfortunately end up being the same. The raids and arrests that followed would seemingly disrupt both the G-Way and the so-called Malvern Cruise operation for the time being, and while the court cases against Riley and his 2 alleged accomplices, Philip Atkins and Jason Wisdom, would last the rest of the 2000s until 2009, when all 3 men were eventually found guilty for the murder of Brenton Charlton, and these would become the first convictions in Canada of a murder committed for the benefit of a criminal street gang. Meanwhile, Riley was still reportedly also facing charges for 2 murders, while Toronto police had actually alleged that he had been involved in as many as 4 more murders. As the 2010s begun, the G-Way's legacy would be immortalized in print when author and reporter Betsy Powell released a book called The Bad Seeds, the true story of Toronto's Galloway Boys street gang. Riley, on the other hand, would remain in the news as he began dropping music from prison by rapping through the jail phone under the artist name Greasy Money, and despite the dire situation he was in, he was still dropping bars from prison and rapping like he was still on the streets about things like selling coke. But funnily enough, when he was dropping, this was around the same time that Drake was releasing his debut album Thank Me Later, and only 4 years later, Drake would be heard shouting out Greasy Money and calling for his freedom on the song Schemin' Up with the rapper OVO Brian, signaling at this point that Drake was seemingly already affiliated with the G-Way gang. But Riley, aka Greasy Money, was far from getting released, and the following year, after starting his rap career behind bars, he was found guilty for his role in yet another shooting in the Malvern Cruise territory that wounded 2 people. Fortunately, no one was killed in that incident, but throughout this period, newspapers would identify him as the leader of the Galloway Boys gang. Years later, Riley would give an interview from prison to the Toronto-based We Love Hip Hop Network YouTube channel, addressing the name the Galloway Boys, which he claimed no one within the gang had ever actually called themselves. He would also argue that there was nothing organized about the crimes they were committing, with every man taking decisions and doing it for themselves.
Now, from what I was watching in an interview, right, you say that media, that term, the Galloway Boys, was like a term that was brought up by the media, or like putting you guys as organized crime. Was that like a media thing?
Yeah, that's a media thing. First of all, no one calls yourself Galloway Boys.
Mm-hmm.
And first and foremost, overall, no one's not organized. There's no organized crime. Everybody does their own thing. We were criminals living a criminal lifestyle. There's no kickback to no pot. There's no, hey, let's gotta do this. There's none of that stuff.
Yeah.
Organized crime. I was 21 when I came to jail. So 21, they're saying I'm a boss of a criminal organization. Come on, man. There's no organization that ever exists in Galloway.
Meanwhile, in 2012, with numerous shootings and murders taking place, and this being the generation of the gang that would spawn many members who would later become associated with Drake's OVO crew, so a lot of Drake's team in the modern day hailed from the G-Way around this era. Betsy Powell, the author of the book about the gang, would publicly declare in the Toronto Star newspaper that G-Way or the Galloway Boys were back and showed no signs of stopping. Already at the end of 2011, the new generation members of G-Way had allegedly committed a murder of yet another innocent man named Dimitri Barnaby. This would lead Toronto police starting a new investigation into G-Way called Operation Brazen. But when things would really get out of control was the infamous July 2012 Danzig Street mass shooting. Danzig Street is located just a few hundred yards away from G-Way's home base, meaning that the party was attended by numerous members of the gang. According to police and the newspapers, the shooting incident would originate from the G-Way members taking over the party and beginning to G-check people in the crowd, trying to make sure that there were no outsiders from op neighborhoods, especially members of the Malvern crew, who they allegedly ended up finding and kicking out of the party. Well, members of the Malvern crew didn't appreciate being G-checked and kicked out, and they would allegedly later return with reinforcements, with the confrontation starting off and eventually leading to the tragic mass shooting. Police would also reveal in new news conferences that the new generation of the G-Way were allegedly connected to 3 murders, including Barnaby and the 2 victims of the mass shooting, as well as 7 shootings dating back to the summer of 2011. Once again, Drake could be heard referencing incidents connected to the G-Way in his music, but this time the tone was very different, as back then he actually devoted an entire verse to paying tribute to the victims of the mass shooting on the 2013 song No Guns Allowed by Snoop Dogg, who at the time was performing under his reggae alter ego Snoop Lion. It would take years to find the culprits of this mass shooting, but eventually 3 people were charged and convicted in relation to it. This included alleged G-Way member Nahom Segazab, aka Gifted, who pled guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter and 6 counts of aggravated assault, receiving a 14-year sentence. This was followed in 2015 by the trial of an alleged Malvern crew member, Shaquan Mosquito, aka Bam Bam, whose murder charges were eventually dropped, but he ended up pleading guilty to 4 charges, one of these being counseling 2 people to commit murder. murder. But lastly, the most severe sentence would be handed to Foloranso Owusu, who was just 17 years old at the time of the shooting, with prosecutors alleging that he had fired the first shot in the gun battle, a claim that ultimately led to his conviction on 2 counts of second-degree murder, although he didn't actually fire the killing shots, as well as 1 count of attempted murder, 1 count of aggravated assault, and 1 count of reckless discharge, leading him to a life sentence in 2016. Meanwhile, the following year after the mass shooting, in 2013, there would be yet another major police raid, during which the police would hit 41 alleged gang members with over 400 charges, these including alleged members of the G-Way, as well as alleged members of a crew who police and media labelled simply as the Orton Park Gang, the name coming from Orton Park Road that runs to the west of Galloway on the other side of a large nature reserve, and this gang was the alleged new main ops of the new generation of the G-Way. After this raid, the media's interest in what was happening around Galloway appeared to fade considerably, with coverage shifting largely to the ongoing court cases that involved alleged members of the gang. One such case concerned Jason Wisdom, one of the 3 men convicted in the murder case involving the alleged leader of the gang, Tyshawn Riley, aka Grease Money, with Wisdom getting acquitted of his charges in 2017 after having spent 13 years in police custody. After regaining his freedom, Wisdom would eventually become part of Drake's OVO crew, now known on Instagram as OVO Dracula, this being yet another sign of Drake's deep ties to the most dangerous members of the G-Way gang. But while the media would largely stop reporting about the G-Way or the so-called Galloway boys, outside of the media limelight, the gang has seemingly continued to operate to this day, something we'll discuss in more detail later. But when it comes to Drake's gang affiliations in Toronto, as mentioned at the beginning, there's also another crew who seemingly hailed from the same area as the G-Way, but were known by a different name that Drake has serious ties to, that dangerous gang being known in the streets as Reps Up. Reps Up is a clique that seemingly got started in G-Way's hood in the late 2000s. One of their most known members is the rapper Preem, formerly known as P. Rain, whose oldest music videos on YouTube go all the way back to 2009, while he can also be seen repping Reps Up in interviews all the way back in 2010.
What's up, man? It's your boy P. Rain, Reps Up, hailing from Canada, Toronto. I'm all the way in Vancouver, BC, with your boy, the Archivist. Holla.
In 2014, Preem would drop a hood vlog on his YouTube channel talking about the infamous history of his hood in Galloway.
This is definitely, to me, the craziest neighborhood in the country, as far as Canada goes. Especially events that took place here. I've never seen it happen anywhere else in Canada on that magnitude of like violence, just like publicity, negative publicity and shit that we've got. And that's nothing to be proud of, and just say, oh, we're the baddest neighborhood in the country, but that's just what it was. As far as you can Google Galloway and see like where we come from, what's happened there, you know? So many used to stand up there in the nighttime just so that when the police were driving by Kingston Road, you couldn't see them. And they were hustling, looking for the fiends walking by up and down. A lot of prostitutes and fiends just walking up and down this strip right here. Because before they built all these townhouses, there was a lot of motels, a lot of shit that brought a lot of crackheads through, so they used to just stay out here all night and wait for who to walk by or whatever. And if you stood right in there, police really couldn't see you no matter how slow they were going, because all the branches and were like camouflage. So I remember they came through one day and just chopped this whole bitch down. That's why you don't see no branches no more, so that they can see anybody out here.
He would explain how the gang scene around Galloway died down from its golden years in the 90s and early 2000s due to a new police station that was built in the area during the mid-2000s.
It was always going on outside here. Everybody was always out here hustling, doing what the ever it was, you know. And then it's like, when so much are hustling in one little neighborhood, that breeds violence. Violence breeds police. So they built a multi-million-dollar facility around the corner, you know, one of the top police stations in the city, and shut this whole shit down, and this is what happens. You don't see nobody outside, everybody's in jail, and this is what's left.
At the time of the vlog, Preem, aka P. Rain, was promoting his mixtape Dear America, the name coming from the fact that he couldn't enter the United States at the time due to his criminal record that included drug and gun charges from his youth. The mixtape included features from many mainstream rappers, including Meek Mill, French Montana, A$AP Rocky, Party Next Door, Waka Flocka Flame, Future, and of course none other than Drake. So this guy clearly was connected. In a 2015 interview, Preem explained how his friendship with Drake came through other mutual friends they shared, and it goes all the way back to when he was still in high school, and Drake was actually an actor in Degrassi, the Canadian teenage drama TV show where Drake first became famous.
We met through some mutual friends, from guys that we went to high school with and things like that. I mean, I had a friend that he knew, so we met like before I even knew he was a rapper, when he was still on Degrassi and things like that. We became close friends. We just clicked, and everybody used to just go out together and like that. So naturally, me being that I was rapping and him starting to rap, musically, it kind of, you know, just came together. But
He would also explain the formation of Reps Up, explaining how it started as a rap group that he came up with while still in high school with his friends. One of the early pioneers of Reps Up was also Styles, another longtime member affiliated with Drake's OVO crew. But as time went on, Reps Up grew into a much larger collective, bringing together people from Galloway and the surrounding community under the same banner.
And for the people that don't know, tell us about Reps Up.
Man, Reps Up is just something that I created when I was still in high school with a few homies. We used to
Chubbs.
we used to be a rap group actually before Chubbs. Chubbs used to live in the States, so I used to be in a rap group with my cousin, one of my best friends, Styles, and we were called the Reps. You know what I mean? And Reps Up is just something we used to say. It was like a slogan, like throw your reps up when you make the R's with your fingers. But I mean, people just kind of gravitated towards Reps Up more than the reps. And that slogan kind of became our name, so we stuck with it. Yeah, we stuck with it and we ran with it. But I mean, it's like a family, man. It's the people from my neighborhood, guys I've grown up with, my family, my friends and homies like that. And that's just what it is, Reps Up.
Preem would also explain how before OVO, there was a clique called ATF that both Drake and Preem repped in their hometown. ATF was also the name of a blog that was focused on Drake, standing for All Things Fresh, although the initials also happened to match those of America's Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, the federal agency that's heavily involved in investigating gun trafficking and conducting firearms seizures along the US-Canadian border. This double meaning would appear in Drake's 2008 song Ransom, where he rapped that he wasn't gangbanging, but he repped ATF, a line that on the surface referred to their crew, but also carried a second meaning through its association with the federal agency, with Drake adding that unlike the real ATF, you wouldn't catch him wearing a badge. In fact, Drake was even still repping the ATF on his 2010 album Thank Me Later, but it was the Reps Up name that would ultimately stick, with many Reps Up members still belonging to Drake's inner circle and OVO. And while Drake would eventually go all in with the OVO name that he had started around the same time in the late 2000s when his rap career blew up, not all Reps Up members would end up staying loyal to Drake. In 2024, during Drake's lyrical warfare with Kendrick Lamar and other rappers who Drake felt had backstabbed him, Drake would end up shouting out Preem in the song Family Matters. On that track, he would rap that if his shooters are doing TikToks, the realest shooter in his rival gang is P's brother, referring to Preem. This bar would reference Drake's longtime beef with the singer The Weeknd and his XO crew, as Weeknd had said in an earlier song titled All to Myself, which also included Drake's other rivals at the time, Future and the producer Metro Boomin. Weeknd sung how Drake's shooters make TikToks, meaning that they were soft and they couldn't be taken seriously, with Preem's brother on the other hand, that Drake was referring to is yet another Reps Up member called Gilla, who can actually be seen in the music video for Nav and The Weeknd's 2019 track Price on My Head, where The Weeknd also simultaneously sings about how people on Drake's side would actually ride out for him too. So nowadays, especially among the older crowd, Reps Up, OVO and G-Way are all basically one big family, something that can be seen from this Instagram story by Reps Up member called 9 from Drake's 37th birthday in 2023, where he can be seen rocking a G-Way chain, while another Reps Up member Styles rocks an OVO owl chain, and another Reps Up member, TV Gucci, rocks both OVO and G-Way chains together. As this post shows, this alliance includes numerous members who are in the OVO inner circle, but perhaps nobody is closer to Drake than the man known as Chubbs, or sometimes also Capo, one of the most feared people in Toronto, who became known as Drake's head of security. Chubbs is perhaps the most mysterious member of the OVO crew, and he's been very careful to not ever do any interviews or put himself out there publicly too much. But what we do know from interviews of other members, like Preem, Chubbs was seemingly living in America when Preem and his friends were in high school and came up with the Reps Up crew, meaning that his addition to the G-Way gang ties and their associates seemingly took place much later.
Man, Reps Up is just something that I created when I was still in high school with a few homies. We used to be a rap group actually before Chubbs. Chubbs used to live in the States, so I used to be in a rap group with my cousin, one of my best friends, Styles.
But the main source where we know about Chubbs is actually through Drake's music itself, with Drake mentioning Chubbs countless times in his tracks, often painting a picture of him not only as his head of security, but also as his top shooter, ready for action and crash out missions at any time. Some of the earliest mentions of Chubbs by Drake date back to 2011, back when Drake was already painting him as somebody that was in love with the streets, everything that comes along with it. On the 2013 track The Motion, Drake would highlight their friendship goes way back, while shouting out the east side of Toronto, referring likely particularly to Scarborough and more specifically the Galloway Road area. And the mentions would keep on coming while Drake's career was rising to a new level, like following the release of the hugely successful album Views in 2016. On the song 4 PM in Calabasas, which was released later that year, Drake would portray Chubbs as someone always by his side, while the following year on the track No Long Talk, Drake would describe Chubbs as a fixer if he ever needed to fix things. And I'm not sure Drake's talking about using Chubbs as his handyman, if you know what I'm saying. Then in 2018, on the hugely popular popular track Look Alive featuring Drake and Blockboy JB, Drake rapped in his feature verse that made the song go viral, this time shouting out Chubbs by his other nickname Capo. Once again, Drake would suggest that Chubbs is someone who is a specialist in street stuff like sliding on the ops. Around this time, Drake would even begin mentioning Chubbs in connection with alleged real-life events, like in the 2018 Behind Bars track that he would do at legendary UK hip-hop platform Link Up TV, where Drake would first mention how he's been with Chubbs through highs and lows, before mentioning how they saw a man last night and he froze out of fear and that there were no cameras present, before mentioning how that was like the one time at Coachella, this allegedly referring to an incident at the 2017 Coachella, where Drake and his crew, including Chubbs, had allegedly had a violent altercation with the rapper Dram and got him thrown out of a private party, after Dram had allegedly confronted Drake about the similarities between his song Cha Cha and Drake's hit song Hotline Bling. In fact, according to someone who was actually there and told me the whole story, no joke, apparently the OVO crew were literally swinging Dram around by his dreads, and Drake was personally throwing hands in the brawl too. Now, these real-life references would continue in 2019 when Drake rapped in the song War about how feds want to tap up and wire his phones, just like Chubbs did Detail. This referring to a lawsuit that producer Detail would file against Drake, claiming that Chubbs had actually beaten him up on Drake's orders, sending him to the hospital with a broken jaw that probably had to get wired, along with other injuries that required several surgeries. However, this lawsuit was later suspiciously thrown out by the judge because Detail failed to appear at the final status conference. Now, the following year in 2020, as the COVID pandemic kept everyone inside, Drake would release the first single from his upcoming project Dark Lane demo tapes, titled 2C Slide. The song was low-key like a party song that was also a metaphor for street stuff, with Drake singing on a song that he's made a commercial dance track, but is low-key really about street activity. The music video for the song would show Drake walking alone around his enormous Toronto mansion while dressed up in a Nike ski mask, all while rapping about how he and his crew will do crimes by themselves if other people are moving shaky, and he would even say that if he's moving too shaky to shoot, then Chubbs will be the one who finishes the mission by himself. Once again painting Chubbs as his #1 goon who is not afraid of doing anything that Drake is too shaky to pull off. The same sentiment was actually echoed in the 2021 song The Remorse, where Drake paid his respects to Chubbs, rapping how he had pulled up to him every time that he needed him. While in the 2022 song Churchill Downs by Jack Harlow, Drake would rap in his feature verse, a clever wordplay, first saying how people like to test them like they know what they're on, while Chubbs got the magazine cover like Rolling Stone. A metaphor meaning that Chubbs has got the magazine of his weapon concealed, but he is ready to show it off and shoot if someone really decides to try OVO. In 2024, while Drake was having his back-to-back diss track war with Kendrick Lamar, even Kendrick would mention Chubbs' reputation as Drake's shooter, rapping in the song Euphoria how he likes the singing Drake, not the Drake that tries to act tough, and that Drake is going to make Kendrick bring Puff back, meaning Puff Daddy or Diddy, this allegedly being a reference to an incident where Diddy had actually slapped Drake all the way back in 2014 at DJ Khaled's birthday bash. And if you want a full breakdown of that, it's on my channel from years ago. Kendrick would go on to say, let's see if Chubbs really crashes out for Drake, like he keeps implying in his songs. So clearly, all of these mentions of Chubbs as Drake's main muscle and shooter and goon have made him a popular topic of speculation on platforms like Reddit, where people still debate just how deep in the streets he truly was. But Chubbs is not the only alleged demon in Drake's camp. Another commonly mentioned member with a very, very dark reputation is Baka, aka Baka Not Nice, who also was part of Drake's security team and has ties to the G-Way and reps up. Unlike Chubbs, Baka has put himself out there, releasing his own music for close to 10 years that have millions and millions of views on platforms like YouTube, as well as featuring on Drake's songs several times. But Baka has also been shouted out by Drake in his songs, like on the 2014 track Schemin' Up, where Drake asked for the freedom of the former G-Way leader Tyson Riley, aka Greasy Money, while also calling for the freedom of Baka in the same lyric twice. So with Baka, we don't have to speculate about his criminal past because it's been very well documented in the media and in the courts. Born in 1979, after spending his childhood in Montreal, Baka moved to Toronto, seemingly in a hood that was located close to the G-Way's first main ops, the Malvern crew. But Baka's hood was allegedly affiliated with the G-Way and Reps Up, whose hood was located further north. In podcasts, Baka has explained how he and his partners in his hood went on a crime spree when he was around 18, with Baka eventually getting caught.
So basically, like when I was 18, so it's crazy. So at one point I went on a rampage with my little buddies in the streets. We were just like doing a whole bunch of robberies, armed robberies, just going crazy as kids, you know? And anyways, long story short, I ended up getting caught.
Okay.
And I ended up taking the charge
Okay.
Like they didn't have anything on any of my other friends, but they wanted me to roll over on them.
He would receive a 2-year and 7-month sentence, and after completing it, he was back in the streets. In 2001, Baka, real name Travis Savory, would end up getting tangled in the biggest case of his life, as he was convicted on an attempted murder charge, receiving a hefty 13-year sentence. However, he was able to appeal the conviction in 2005, and once again was able to return to the streets of Toronto, but it didn't take long for Baka to end up back in trouble once again. And in 2006, there would be the first mention of him in local media when he was busted in Toronto's East End with guns and drugs, namely crack, with him receiving a whopping 19 firearms and drug charges. The next mention in the newspapers would come already the following year, and this time it was part of a case involving none other than the original leader of the G-Way, Omar Demetrius, aka O, who is now seemingly known as Lloyd Demetrius. After first fleeing to Jamaica in 1999 following the shooting where he hit a man twice, Demetrius had tried to return to Canada under his own name already the following year, leading to him getting slapped with a 9-year sentence for attempted murder. But already in 2005 he was getting paroled and deported back to Jamaica. But now he had somehow managed to sneak back into Canada, but again he was captured after a 2007 shooting incident where Baka was also one of the men charged. But Baka's most controversial case would take place in 2014, embarrassingly when he was already part of Drake's security team. In June of that year, he was arrested and charged with multiple prostitution and trafficking related offences, which had involved a 22-year-old woman whom prosecutors alleged that he had forced into prostitution. The following year in May, Baka would end up pleading guilty to assaulting the 22-year-old woman, receiving a light sentence of 6 months. But since he had already spent 10 months in jail, he was allowed to go free immediately, with Drake himself celebrating the release on Instagram by writing how there was something in the air today and a lot of good things happening at once. But this one means the most, been waiting for 11 months, Baka finally home. It was seemingly about a year later when Baka would make a transition from Drake's security team to a rapper, actually signing to Drake's OVO label and beginning to drop songs and music videos back to back, with his first music video for the track titled TCHC appearing to be filmed in his old hood in Scarborough. By 2017, Baka's rap career would truly take off with the release of Live Up to My Name, a song whose music video has since amassed more than 16 million views on YouTube. The video shows Baka enjoying the high life in Los Angeles, while later scenes feature him wearing a sweater with a large golden OVO owl logo on it. The video also includes appearances from several prominent artists like Sway Lee and Slim Jimmy from Ray Shremmerd, Nav, and also The Weeknd, who was still closely associated with the OVO camp at this point before the eventual falling out with Drake. Even Drake himself would make an appearance, clearly proud of his new signee and muscle. But unfortunately, 2017 would also end up being a tragic year for Drake, OVO, Reps Up, and the G-Way Alliance, as one of their main members, called Fifth, real name Anthony Soares, was gunned down on September 14th in what appeared to be a targeted assassination. Afterwards, Drake would post a heartfelt tribute to Fifth on Instagram, saying, "RIP to one of our family members, our brother. I still can't even believe this morning was real. It was an honor to have shared years together, and I will always keep your memory alive forever, Fifth." Drake would also serve as a pallbearer at Fifth's funeral 2 weeks later, showing that there was indeed a genuine connection between these two, and Drake actually was clearly close enough to Fifth to attend his funeral. But while the family and friends were mourning their loss, the police would eventually release security camera footage that actually captured Fifth's final moments, putting it out publicly in an effort to receive tips about the suspects. The video would show two shooters running up to Fifth, who was inside the entrance of a large high-rise lobby. The shooters immediately opened fire through the glass, shooting Fifth numerous times, one of them even opening the door to the entrance and shooting some more to guarantee the kill, then wiping the door with his shirt in an apparent attempt to remove any fingerprints, before both shooters run to a getaway car with a driver waiting for them that quickly flees the scene. But despite all the efforts by the police, Fifth's murder remains unsolved, although the calculated manner in which the shooting was carried out leaves little doubt that it was clearly a targeted gang-related hit. Meanwhile, Baka's music career would eventually end up taking a serious blow in 2024 when his past came to haunt not only him, but also Drake, as Kendrick Lamar released his chart-topping diss song Not Like Us, a track that many considered to be the knockout punch in their highly publicized rap beef. In that song, Kendrick would diss not only Drake, but also OVO members like Chubbs, and most notably Baka, whose past charges involving a young woman gave Kendrick a powerful angle of attack. By drawing attention to Baka's role within OVO, Kendrick added further credibility to the song's main theme that was accusing Drake and members of his inner circle of behaving like predators with young and underage women. Phrases like A minor, certified lover boy, certified PDF, say Drake, I hear you like him young, Baka got a weird case, why is he around? All these lines ended up going super viral, and they had the whole world laughing at how the OVO crew had been dealing with women. This was made even worse by the cover art that depicted Drake's famous home on Google Maps, with added dots that are apparently used to denote that predators on the sex offenders register were living there. Baka would later respond to the diss in an interview with the YouTube channel Hot Freestyle, saying how he was about to respond to the diss immediately, but Drake would actually convince him not to do it.
Obviously, during like the recent events that happened, like last summer and everything like that, I won't get too much into details with it, bore you with that, because we don't care about that too much. But how was it for you to hear all the noise that people were saying, right? People were just talking about stuff that they don't even know about, saying, oh, Ray, this is this, whatever. Yeah. How did you keep your composure and stay calm?
Yo, to be honest with you, man, at first, my first initial thing was to respond and respond quickly, very efficiently, and very to the point.
Very directly.
Yeah, and you know, but like it was like it started brewing in me because where I come from, like that doesn't happen. Like you can't just call out a man and not have paperwork to back up your talks. Like that is it's ludicrous. And then like to see like a whole nation behind it and celebrating it like it's a true story is unbelievable, because you know, everybody has to understand, like I have a kid, Drake has a kid, you know what I mean? So like making accusations like that are like ridiculous and out of this world, you know what I'm saying? So, but like what I was gonna tell you is this, like I was building up a lot of anger and stuff like that, but then I got a call, and I don't know why I got this call. It's like God said something to him or something, but the boy, sorry, it might not have been a call, it might have been a text message, but he messaged me and he's like, yo, I know what you're feeling, I know you as an individual, and I know how you get down, but I'm just letting you know, like, don't listen to the noise, because it's noise. And if you go back and look at all these people that are saying things or having anything to say, they're not even actual real people, they're like bots. So like, don't let that bother you, bro. Like,
so far we've covered some of the older members and affiliates of G-Way, but there's also the new generation who are still coming up and pledging allegiance to Drake and OVO. One of the most known members of the new generation of G-Way is the rapper Lil C, who can be seen in his music videos hanging out in front of the high-rise where the G-Way gang originated from on the corner of Galloway and Kingston Roads, as well as in other housing developments controlled by the gang like the Innisfree Housing Cooperative located on the other side of Kingston Road. His music videos also feature other signs of the gang's presence still in the area, such as G-Way tags on the wall. Now, much like the UK drill scene, which has arguably influenced the Toronto scene more in recent years than the American scene, Lil C and his partners are most often seen in his music videos masked up, hiding their real identities, likely due to the illegal activities that they may well still be taking part in at that point. Or maybe because in Lil C's case, it also builds an aura of mystery around him that kind of keeps the music career moving. Lil C and his partners are also often seen hinting at their affiliation with Drake and OVO, like making Instagram posts with Drake's song, like the song Plot Twist, where Drake raps the line about the G-Way handshake, with Lil C and his partners showing the world how that shake is actually done. He's also followed on Instagram by the older G-Way and Reps Up members, who are some of the main people in Drake's OVO crew, including none other than Drake's alleged top shooter, Chubbs. So perhaps Drake's lyrics about having young shooters ready to mask up and crash out for him aren't cap after all. So knowing the history of groups like G-Way and Reps Up, as well as their affiliations with Drake and his OVO camp, the question still remains, is OVO really a gang? While many people associated with OVO, including Drake's inner circle, do clearly have ties to gangs and criminal activity, officially OVO itself is much more famous as a music label, a brand and a business rather than a criminal organization. But that definitely doesn't let Drake off the hook, because as we've covered throughout his career, Drake has repeatedly aligned himself with individuals whose backgrounds go far beyond the occasional run-ins with the law. Among those, even people like Tyshawn Riley, aka Greasy Money, whose freedom Drake has continued to demand in his songs, and who police and prosecutors have linked not only to the murder of a completely innocent bystander, which he's still in prison for, but also up to 6 other murders and numerous attempted murders. Then there's guys like Baka, a member of Drake's inner circle whose long criminal history includes not only other violent crimes, but also highly problematic charges related to prostitution and trafficking. And beyond those individuals are the apparent connections between members of Drake's inner circle and the newer generation of G-Way members who seemingly remain active on Toronto streets today. So Drake has really surrounded himself with an extraordinary number of people connected to serious criminal allegations and gang activity of all kinds. And as long as these relationships continue, there's always going to be the possibility that future investigation could find Drake somehow entangled in some kind of criminal RICO takedown himself. And if that day ever comes, it really wouldn't be surprising to see the police raiding the embassy and prosecutors attempting to argue that OVO really isn't a record label or a lifestyle brand, but is indeed a criminal organization with Drake at the very top.